After 20 years of special operations in the world's most hostile environments, Catherine and I had finally found our piece of paradise. Our new home in Oak Ridge Estates represented everything I had fought for overseas. Quiet streets lined with maple trees, neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs, the scent of freshly cut grass on weekend mornings, the simple pleasure of watching sunsets from our back porch without scanning the horizon for threats. The transition to civilian life had not been easy for me. The hypervigilance, the nightmares, the constant assessment of tactical vulnerabilities in everyday locations. But Catherine had been my anchor throughout it all. She suggested the garden as therapy. I approached it with the same discipline I had applied to military operations. Each plant placed with mathematical precision, each row measured to exact specifications. The neighbors commented on my gardening skills, unaware that the methodical approach was how I managed the chaos still raging in my mind. We had been in the neighborhood for 3 months when the first letter arrived. Notice of violation, unauthorized modifications to exterior property. I read the letter twice, confused by the accusation. The garden beds were immaculate, the house exterior maintained to perfection. The letter cited a rose trellis I had built for Catherine as an unauthorized structure requiring immediate removal. I handled it properly, filed the retroactive permission forms, submitted the detailed specifications, paid the processing fee. 2 weeks later, a second violation arrived, this time for excessive garden area exceeding permitted square footage. Again, I complied, reduced the size, resubmitted documentation, paid another fee. Catherine suggested attending the monthly HOA meeting. It might help to put faces to these letters, she said one evening as we sat on the porch. Show them we are willing to work with the community standards. The small community center was half full when we arrived. I scanned the room automatically, identifying exits, calculating threat vectors, noting potential weapons of opportunity. Old habits never die. The HOA board sat at a folding table at the front of the room. 4 middle-aged homeowners and their president, Richard Harmon. Mr. Harmon runs the largest real estate agency in the county, the elderly woman beside us whispered. Been president of the HOA for 8 years. Nobody runs against him anymore. Harmon stood out immediately. Expensive watch, custom suit, the practiced smile of someone accustomed to getting his way. When Catherine raised her hand during the open forum to ask about our violation notices, his smile never reached his eyes. "The Millers, our newest residents," he announced to the room. "We have very specific standards in Oak Ridge Estates, standards that protect everyone's property values. I am sure you understand the importance of following the rules to maintain our community aesthetic." His condescending tone triggered something primal in me. I had faced down warlords with more respect for their adversaries, but I maintained my cover as the polite, unassuming homeowner. My military background remained private by choice. 20 years of classified operations meant discretion was ingrained in my nature. After the meeting, Harmon approached us in the parking lot. Up close, I noticed the subtle bulge of a concealed handgun beneath his tailored jacket. Interesting choice for an HOA meeting. "The violations are really just formalities," he said smoothly. "I have found that some properties would benefit from professional management. My company offers very reasonable buyout packages, something to consider if maintaining compliance becomes burdensome." As he walked away, my instincts flared, the practiced speech, the implied threat, the strategic violations. In another life, I would have recognized this as the opening moves of a territorial dispute. But this was suburban America, not a combat zone. I dismissed the thought as paranoia, a remnant of too many years spent looking for enemies in shadows. The next day, another violation arrived, and another the following week, each more trivial than the last. When I installed security cameras, we received a violation for unapproved surveillance equipment. When Catherine planted new flowers, we were cited for non-approved botanical species. The pattern was unmistakable. We were being targeted. "This is not random harassment," I told Catherine as we reviewed the growing stack of violation notices spread across our dining room table. "This is systematic pressure. They want something." Catherine placed her hand over mine. "Maybe we should consider selling, start fresh somewhere else." The front doorbell rang before I could answer. I opened it to find Richard Harmon standing on our porch, two men in business attire flanking him like personal security. "Final courtesy notice," he said, handing me another envelope. "The board has approved fines for ongoing violations. They begin tomorrow at $500 per day." I kept my voice level controlled. "There must be some mistake. We have addressed every violation." "Have you?" His smile was predatory now. "The documentation shows otherwise. I would hate to see this escalate to liens against your property." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Some people simply do not fit into certain communities, Mr. Miller. The sooner you accept that reality, the easier this will be for everyone." As they walked back to their luxury SUV, one of Harmon's associates turned and photographed our house with a professional camera. Not a smartphone, a deliberate documentation. I closed the door slowly, the familiar sensation of being reconnoitered settling into my bones. "What did he mean by that?" Catherine asked, her voice tight with concern. I did not answer immediately. My mind was already shifting gears, moving from civilian homeowner to tactical assessment. The pieces did not add up. The focused pressure, the implied threats, the professional muscle accompanying an HOA president. "I think," I said carefully, "our neighborhood has secrets beneath its perfect surface, and for some reason they have decided we need to go." The certified letters began arriving 3 times weekly, each in the same crisp envelope with the Oak Ridge Estates letterhead, each detailing new and increasingly absurd violations. The color of our mailbox, the height of our grass measured in fractions of inches, the placement of our trash bins exactly 4 inches too far from the curb. I documented everything meticulously, creating a folder with photographs, measurements, and timestamps, proving our compliance with every regulation in the 50-page community guidelines. When I compared our property with similar homes on our street, the selective enforcement became glaringly obvious. The Johnsons had the same mailbox color. The Petersons had taller grass. The Williamses regularly left their trash bins out overnight. None received violations. The pattern was so blatant that it bordered on amateur. "They are not even trying to hide it," I told Catherine one evening as I added another letter to our documentation file. "This is deliberate pressure." Catherine looked up from her laptop where she had been researching HOA laws. "The question is why? We have the smallest house on the block. The property itself is not particularly valuable. Why target us specifically?" That question haunted me. In tactical assessment, understanding the enemy's objective is crucial. Without knowing what Harmon wanted, we were fighting blind. I decided to explore legal options first. I contacted a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. We met at his office, a modest suite in a strip mall 20 miles from our neighborhood. "Selective enforcement is absolutely grounds for a lawsuit," Attorney Davis explained after reviewing our documentation. "But these cases are expensive, time-consuming, and the HOA has deeper pockets than most homeowners. They can outlast you financially. As I left his office, I noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street. It pulled into traffic shortly after I did, maintaining 3 car lengths behind me. The surveillance was not even subtle. Another amateur move that suggested overconfidence. That evening, our neighbor Jacob Renner knocked on our door. An older man with weathered hands from decades of construction work, Jacob had always been friendly but distant. "Need to talk to you," he said quietly, eyes scanning the street behind him. "Not here. Meet me at Wilson Creek Park tomorrow. Noon, the fishing pier." Before I could respond, he walked away quickly, shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. The next day at the park, Jacob kept his voice low as we pretended to fish. "You are not the first. 3 other families before you, all pressured out within months of moving in." "Pressured out for what purpose?" I asked, casting my line into the still water. "Harmon's real estate company buys the houses at below market value, renovates minimally, sells at premium prices through exclusive listings." Jacob reeled in slowly. "My brother-in-law works construction, said they cut corners on everything, but the houses flip fast. Cash deals mostly." "Sounds like a standard house flipping operation," I noted. "Unethical perhaps, but why the pressure tactics?" Jacob's eyes darted around before he leaned closer. "Because the Cardona family is involved. They launder money through real estate in this county. Have for years. Word is Harmon is their front man for clean investments." The Cardona name triggered something in my memory. During my final years with Delta, we had worked alongside DEA operations targeting domestic distribution networks of international cartels. The Cardonas were mid-level players in the Southeast region, known for their business diversification and political connections. I thanked Jacob for the information and spent the rest of the afternoon driving evasive patterns to ensure I was not followed home. That night, I began converting our spare bedroom into an operational center. Old habits, old skills, reawakening like muscle memory. I installed additional cameras covering all approach vectors to our property, set up motion detectors linked to silent alerts on my phone, created backup power systems, established secure communication protocols with Catherine, basic security measures that any cautious homeowner might implement. Then I went deeper. Using skills honed through decades of intelligence gathering, I began building profiles on Richard Harmon and each HOA board member, property records, business filings, tax assessments, court cases, social media, the digital exhaust of modern life providing a comprehensive intelligence picture. The patterns emerged quickly. In the past 5 years, Harmon Realty had purchased and flipped 17 homes in Oak Ridge estates. Each previous owner had sold at 15 to 20% below market value. Each sale followed the same pattern of escalating HOA violations. The renovated houses sold within days of listing, often to LLC buyers with minimal public footprint. The financial flows were suspicious. Construction costs versus sale prices did not align with standard profit margins. The hallmarks of money laundering operations were evident to anyone who knew what to look for. Most concerning were Harmon's associations. Twice monthly, he met with individuals connected to the Cardona organization at an upscale restaurant downtown. His security detail increased from 1 to 3 men over the past year. His lifestyle exceeded the expected income from his legitimate business operations. While Catherine slept, I monitored the street from our darkened living room. A vehicle cruised past our house at precisely 2:17 a.m. No headlights, moving slowly. The same vehicle had appeared on my security footage 3 times in the past week, always during early morning hours, always with the same passive surveillance pattern. I captured the license plate using the high-resolution camera I had installed behind our front curtains. The registration traced back to a shell company owned by another shell company. Amateur smokescreens that would impress civilians but were transparent to someone with my background. The next morning, I followed Harmon from his office to a motorcycle club on the outskirts of town, the Road Demons, a regional outfit known for enforcement work and distribution. Not sophisticated enough for major operations, but useful muscle for those who needed deniable assets. I watched from a distance as Harmon spent 45 minutes inside before emerging with a heavy-set man in a leather vest adorned with the club's insignia. They spoke briefly by Harmon's car before shaking hands and departing separately. That evening, Catherine noticed my preoccupation. "You have that look," she said quietly. "The one from before, when you were planning operations." I had never disclosed the details of my work with Delta Force, but Catherine knew enough, had seen enough during my active years to recognize the signs. "This is not what we thought it was," I told her, showing her the files I had compiled. "Harmon is connected to organized crime. The HOA is being used as a pressure tool for a real estate scheme, and they have enforcers." Catherine studied the information, her expression shifting from concern to determination. Her resilience was why we had survived 20 years of military deployments and the trauma they brought into our marriage. "So what do we do?" she asked finally. "We have options," I replied. "We can sell and move. We can escalate legally, or we can stand our ground and see how far they are willing to go." "This is our home," Catherine said firmly. "We do not run." The next day, another violation notice arrived, this one different from the others. Attached was a photograph of Catherine at the grocery store. The implied message was unmistakable. The rules of engagement had just changed. The call came at 10:47 a.m. I was in the backyard reinforcing the fence when my phone vibrated. Catherine's voice was controlled but tight with tension. "James, there are 2 men following me at Westfield Market." Her words came in measured bursts between normal breaths, using the communication protocol we had established. Black leather jackets, beards. One has a neck tattoo. They are not even trying to be subtle. My body tensed, combat readiness flooding my system. "Are you in immediate danger?" "No, they are just watching, making sure I see them." A pause. One just nodded at me. "They know our address, James. They mentioned our rose garden by name." "Finish your shopping normally. Pay with cash. I will meet you at exit B in 12 minutes. I arrived at the grocery store parking lot in 9 minutes, posy. Tianing myself with clear sightlines to all exits. Catherine emerged right on schedule, walking purposefully toward our predetermined meeting point. 20 meters behind her, 2 men matching her description followed at a casual pace. Road Demons members, based on their cuts. Unmistakable club insignia partially visible beneath their jackets. I pulled up beside Catherine and she got in without hesitation. The 2 men stopped, watching openly as we drove away. One spoke into a phone, reporting to his handler. Amateur intimidation tactics. "Are you all right?" I asked once we were clear of the area. Catherine's hands were steady as she fastened her seat belt. "They wanted me to be scared, to tell you that they could get close to me whenever they wanted." That evening, I discovered the first evidence of physical surveillance on our property. Small impressions in the soft earth beside our back fence. Cigarette butts of a brand popular with the Road Demons. A clear sight line to our kitchen window. They had been watching our routines, mapping our movements. We need to adjust our security posture, I told Catherine as we sat at the kitchen table, deliberately positioned away from windows. No predictable patterns, no routines they can map, and you need to stay with your sister for a few days. Catherine shook her head firmly. I am not leaving you alone to face this. Not because I cannot protect you, I clarified, because I need to establish our countermeasures without worrying about your safety. 3 days maximum. She reluctantly agreed, packing an overnight bag while I swept the house for surveillance devices. I found the first bug in our living room lamp, the second under the dining table, commercially available audio recorders. Again, amateur work, but effective enough against ordinary civilians. The monthly HOA meeting that evening became the stage for the next escalation. The community center was unusually full. Word had spread about our ongoing violations. Neighbors watched with a mixture of sympathy and relief that they were not the targets. When the open forum began, I stood and approached the front table with my documentation folder. I would like to address the pattern of selective enforcement against our property, I stated calmly, placing photographs on the table showing identical violations on other properties that had received no citations. These 17 examples demonstrate clear discrimination in how regulations are being applied. Harmon's practiced smile never wavered. Mr. Miller, while we appreciate your concerns, the board has reviewed your case thoroughly. The violations stand. If you wish to appeal, there is a formal process that requires a $500 filing fee per violation. From the back of the room, someone calculated aloud. That would be over $7,000 just to appeal. A murmur rippled through the attendees. Harmon silenced it with a sharp look before turning back to me. Some people simply do not belong in certain communities, Mr. Miller, he said, echoing his earlier statement but now in public. And problems have a way of solving themselves when people recognize where they fit, or do not fit. The threat hung in the air. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. They were part of the scheme but perhaps not fully aware of its darker dimensions. Is that an official HOA position? I asked, my voice deceptively calm. That some residents do not belong. It is my professional assessment as a real estate expert, Harmon replied smoothly. Some properties would benefit from different ownership. My company offers fair market consultations if you are interested in exploring options. As the meeting concluded, I noticed several residents avoiding eye contact. Fear was palpable in the room. Harmon had demonstrated his power, and no one wanted to become the next target. In the parking lot, one of Harmon's security men bumped into me deliberately as I walked to my car. "Watch yourself, Miller," he muttered. "Accidents happen in nice neighborhoods too." At home, I transformed our spare bedroom into a full tactical operations center. I removed several floorboards to access a gun safe I had installed when we first moved in. Inside were reminders of my previous life: tactical gear, specialized equipment, communication devices, tools for situations exactly like this one. Through my night vision scope, I observed 2 figures in the wooded area behind our property. They were photographing our house, documenting entry points and security measures. I captured their images using a telephoto lens, adding them to my growing intelligence file. That night, Catherine and I established fallback protocols and communication safeguards. As a military spouse, she was no stranger to contingency planning. We agreed on check-in procedures and emergency signals. She would stay with her sister in the neighboring county, returning only when I had established our security perimeter. The next morning, I watched Catherine drive away, a tight knot forming in my chest. In 20 years of marriage, we had rarely been separated outside of my deployments. As her car disappeared around the corner, I noticed a dark sedan pull out 3 houses down, following at a discreet distance. I immediately activated the tracker I had placed in Catherine's car and monitored her route. The sedan maintained its tail until she reached the highway, then pulled off. Just verification of her departure, not a direct threat. Not yet. Over the next 2 days, I hardened our home defenses while maintaining the appearance of normal activity. Reinforced door frames, security film on windows, additional cameras covering blind spots. I repositioned furniture to create choke points and fields of fire if needed. Ordinary household items became improvised defensive measures that would be invisible to casual observation. When Catherine returned, the surveillance on our house had increased to nearly constant coverage. Different vehicles parked with sightlines to our property. Occasional walk-bys from unfamiliar neighbors. The psychological pressure was escalating according to a familiar playbook. "They are building up to something," I told Catherine as we reviewed the security footage together. "This pattern of escalation typically precedes direct action." That evening, as Catherine drove home from her part-time job at the library, she called me, her voice tight with controlled fear. "There is a motorcycle behind me. Has been for the last 10 minutes. Too close." I accessed the tracker remotely. Turn left at the next light, then immediate right into the shopping center. She followed my directions precisely. "He is still behind me, black Harley, Road Demon's vest." "Drive directly to the police station," I instructed. "I will meet you there." By the time I arrived, Catherine was giving a statement to a disinterested officer who was clearly reluctant to file a report about a motorcycle that happened to be going the same direction. "Ma'am, following is not illegal unless there is an explicit threat," the officer explained with practiced patience. "We can take a report, but there is not much we can do." As we left the station, Catherine gripped my arm. "They are not even pretending anymore, James. They want us to know they can get to me." The rules of engagement had fundamentally changed. They had crossed the line from intimidation to direct threat. My military training screamed that preemptive action was now justified. But we were not in a combat zone. We were in suburban America where different rules applied. "We document everything," I told her as we drove home, taking an indirect route and watching for tails. "Build our case legally, but we also prepare for worst-case scenarios." That night, I slept in short intervals, awakening to check security feeds and listen for unusual sounds. The weight of my sidearm under the pillow was a familiar comfort from another life. Dawn was breaking when I spotted the unmarked van driving slowly past our house for the third time. The board was set, the pieces were moving, and I could feel in my bones that the enemy was preparing to make their next move. Tuesday began like any other day. Catherine left for her volunteer shift at the community library at 9:30 a.m. I checked her car for tracking devices or tampering before she departed. Our standard security protocol now. She would text confirmations at predetermined intervals throughout the day. The first message arrived on schedule at 10:15 a.m. At library, all normal. The second at 12:30 p.m. Lunch break, all clear. At 2:45 p.m., the third check-in never came. I called immediately, straight to voicemail. I activated the tracker on her car, still in the library parking lot. I called the library. The young man who answered confirmed Catherine had left approximately 20 minutes earlier, stating she needed to stop at the grocery store before heading home. I was already moving, gathering my go bag and weapon as I remotely accessed our home security system. The footage from 2 hours earlier showed the same unmarked van I had spotted that morning, now parked across the street with a clear view of our house. The grocery store security cameras required more sophisticated access. Using skills that remained classified, I bypassed their system within minutes. The footage showed Catherine exiting the store at 2:37 p.m., walking toward her car with a single shopping bag. 3 men approached her in the parking lot. One engaged her in conversation while the other 2 moved to flank her. The coordinated movement of professionals. Catherine recognized the danger immediately. She attempted to retreat toward the store entrance. The largest man grabbed her arm while another produced a cloth that he pressed against her face. Chemical incapacitation, basic but effective. They loaded her into a van within seconds. The entire operation took less than 30 seconds. I downloaded the footage to my secure tablet and returned home, forcing myself to drive within speed limits despite every instinct screaming for immediate action. Combat operations require planning. Emotion leads to mistakes. Mistakes get hostages killed. At home, I pulled up our comprehensive security feeds. At 3:24 p.m., a motorcycle delivered an envelope to our mailbox. The rider wore Road Demon's colors. No attempt at concealment. They wanted me to know exactly who was responsible. The envelope contained a single typed page and a small metal object that I immediately recognized as Catherine's wedding ring. You have 24 hours to sign the enclosed property transfer documents. The house must be vacated within 48 hours. Your wife will be released once the property is empty. If you contact law enforcement, she dies. If you fail to comply, she dies. This is not negotiable. Attached was a legally prepared deed transfer, listing the buyer as Harmon Investment Properties, LLC. The purchase price was exactly half of the property's market value. I felt the change come over me physically. The calm, analytical mindset that had kept me alive through hundreds of high-risk operations. The civilian facade falling away. Time slowed. Sensory perception heightened. The transition from James Miller, retired homeowner, to Captain James Miller, Delta Force operator, was instant and complete. I moved methodically through the house, activating systems that had been dormant since my retirement. From a hidden compartment in the basement, I retrieved equipment that did not officially exist. Tactical communications, specialized entry tools, non-standard weapons, the tools of my former trade. The first priority in any hostage situation is intelligence gathering. I needed to locate Catherine. The Road Demons controlled several properties in the county. Their main clubhouse, 2 safe houses, a warehouse. Each needed to be surveilled to determine the most likely holding location. I changed into nondescript clothing, dark colors, nothing tactical that would draw attention. Looking like a threat triggers defensive responses. Looking forgettable is tactical advantage. The Road Demons Clubhouse was my first surveillance target. Located in an industrial zone at the edge of town, the cinderblock building featured minimal windows and multiple security cameras. 6 motorcycles parked outside. 2 men smoking near the entrance. Standard security posture. I observed from a service van I had acquired through channels that would not be traced back to me. The vehicle was positioned with clear sightlines to all entrances while appearing to be part of the landscape. Just another work van in an industrial area. Over 3 hours of observation, I noted 12 members entering or exiting. None appeared to be delivering food or supplies that would indicate a hostage situation. The security was routine rather than heightened. Catherine was likely not here. The first safe house yielded similar results. Minimal activity, no indications of an ongoing operation. At the warehouse, the pattern changed. Located on 5 acres of rural property, the metal building showed signs of recent security upgrades. New cameras, additional exterior lighting, a guard rotation that changed every 2 hours. Most significantly, the unmarked van from the kidnapping footage was parked behind the building. From my observation position in the surrounding woods, I used thermal imaging equipment to scan the structure. 6 heat signatures inside, 5 moving freely, 1 stationary in what appeared to be a small room or office in the rear of the building. Catherine. I maintained surveillance until darkness provided additional cover. The guard rotation was predictable. 2 men outside at all times. 4 inside, likely playing cards based on their clustered position around a table. Amateur security, but the numbers presented a tactical challenge for a solo extraction. I needed more intelligence on the interior layout. Using a directional microphone, I captured fragments of conversation from the guards during their shift change. "Boss wants this wrapped up by tomorrow. Miller better sign those papers. Harmon's getting paranoid about witnesses." The last fragment confirmed my suspicion that Harmon intended to eliminate witnesses regardless of whether I complied with the demands. The moment the property was signed over, Catherine would become a liability. They would never release her alive. I retreated to my vehicle and established a secure connection to access property records for the warehouse. The building had changed hands 3 times in the past year, finally transferring to an LLC connected to the same network of shell companies Harmon used. Included in the records were the original construction plans. The layout was simple: main storage area, small office section with 2 rooms, single bathroom, 2 main entrances plus a loading dock. The thermal imaging had shown Catherine was being held in one of the office rooms. By midnight, I had formulated an extraction plan. The operation would require precision timing and the element of surprise to overcome the numerical disadvantage. I would need to neutralize all 6 targets non-lethally while ensuring Catherine's safety. From my vehicle, I retrieved specialized equipment: flashbang grenades, zip ties, a suppressed pistol loaded with non-lethal rounds, night vision goggles, and a lightweight ballistic vest concealed under a dark jacket. At my concealed position near the warehouse, I prepared the final elements of my plan when my secure phone vibrated. An encrypted message appeared on the screen. It contained only a set of coordinates and a time: 200. I recognized the signature encryption pattern immediately. My former Delta team leader, Colonel Hayes, now working with a federal task force targeting organized crime. I had reached out to several former contacts earlier, careful to provide only enough information to establish surveillance without compromising operational security. The coordinates led to an abandoned gas station 3 miles from my position. At the appointed time, I arrived to find Hayes waiting in an unmarked SUV. "Miller," he greeted me with a nod. "Got your message. Figured you might need some unofficial assistance." "Appreciation," I replied, using our old shorthand. "Situation is time-sensitive. Hostile force has taken my wife. Connected to local real estate scheme. Criminal organization using HOA as front." Hayes processed the information with military efficiency. The Cardona connection. I nodded, unsurprised that he was already aware of the regional players. Local muscle is Road Demons MC. 6 tangos at the warehouse. 1 hostage. Window is closing. Officially, we have been building a RICO case against the Cardonas for 8 months, Hayes explained. Unofficially, we can spare 2 hours before we never had this conversation. Appreciation, I repeated. Hayes handed me a small device. Real-time thermal overlay for your phone might help with your personal matter that we are not discussing. As I prepared to depart, Hayes added, "The road demons are expendable assets to the Cardonas. Remember that. They will be sacrificed if things go south." The tactical implications were clear. If I failed to extract Catherine cleanly, the Cardonas would eliminate everyone involved to maintain deniability. The warehouse would become a kill box. Back at my observation position, I used the thermal device to get updated intelligence. The guard pattern remained unchanged. 2 outside, 4 inside. Catherine's heat signature still in the same location. I checked my equipment one final time. Verified communications were secure. Reviewed the extraction route and contingency plans. In my mind, I could hear my old team leader's voice from countless previous operations. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. The weighted tension of pre-mission focus settled over me. I had executed hundreds of operations more complex than this one, but never with stakes so personal. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. "I am coming for you, Catherine," I whispered into the darkness. "Hold on." 0300 hours, the optimal time for assault operations. Human biorhythms are at their lowest ebb. Guard alertness diminishes. Reaction time slow. The darkness conceals approach vectors while providing tactical advantage to those equipped for night operations. I moved through the tree line toward the warehouse in controlled bursts, freezing between movements to listen for any change in the guard's patrol pattern. My night vision goggles transformed the darkness into shades of green, revealing details invisible to the naked eye. The 2 exterior guards had established a predictable routine over the past hours, meeting at the front entrance every 15 minutes to share a cigarette before resuming their perimeter walk. Sloppy security protocol that created a recurring vulnerability in their coverage. I timed my approach to coincide with their next scheduled smoke break. The warehouse backed against a small hill, creating a blind spot in their patrol route. I positioned myself within this dead zone, waiting for the guards to meet at the front. On schedule, both men converged at the entrance. I moved quickly to the rear loading dock. Using a specialized tool, I defeated the padlock in seconds. The door opened silently on well-oiled hinges. I slipped inside, easing the door closed behind me. The interior was divided by metal shelving and stacked crates, creating a labyrinth of potential cover and concealment, perfect for close-quarters infiltration. I navigated through the maze of shelving, my footsteps silent on the concrete floor. Thermal imaging showed 4 heat signatures grouped together in what appeared to be a break room area. Separate signature remained stationary in the office section. Catherine. The layout matched the building plans I had studied. I positioned myself behind a stack of crates with clear line of sight to the break room entrance. 4 men sat around a table playing cards. Beer bottles and a half-empty whiskey bottle indicated compromised alertness. 2 held handguns in shoulder holsters. 1 had a shotgun leaning against his chair. The 4th appeared unarmed. I extracted a flashbang grenade from my vest. The non-lethal stunner would temporarily disorient them, providing the crucial seconds needed to neutralize the threat without casualties. I pulled the pin, counted 2 seconds, and tossed the device into the center of the break room. Turning away and covering my ears, I waited for the disorienting blast of light and sound. The flashbang detonated with a concussive boom. Before the echo faded, I was moving. The four men were stunned, clutching their eyes and ears in disorientation. I entered the room with practiced efficiency, neutralizing each target with precision strikes to pressure points and nerve clusters. Within 20 seconds, all four were subdued and secured with zip ties. None had managed to discharge their weapons. The element of surprise had worked perfectly. The two exterior guards would have heard the flashbang despite its muffled deployment. Their response would be immediate but predictable. Standard procedure would dictate that one guard investigate while the other secured the perimeter. I positioned myself beside the main entrance, weapon ready but preferring hand-to-hand takedowns to maintain operational silence. The door burst open seconds later. The first guard rushed in, shotgun raised. I struck from his blind spot, disarming him with a swift strike to the brachial plexus. He dropped without a sound. His partner was more cautious, entering low with his weapon sweeping across the dimly lit space. I allowed him to move fully into the building before engaging. A precision strike to the carotid artery rendered him unconscious in seconds. I secured both guards with zip ties and cleared their weapons. 6 threats neutralized. Path to Catherine now open. I moved through the warehouse toward the office area, scanning continuously for additional hostiles. The thermal imaging showed only one remaining heat signature. No surprises, no hidden guards. The door to the small office was secured with a padlock. Another amateur security measure easily defeated. I eased the door open, weapon raised, and found Catherine bound to a chair in the center of the room. Duct tape covered her mouth. Her eyes widened in recognition. I holstered my weapon and moved quickly to her side, removing the tape gently. "I knew you would come," she whispered, voice hoarse from dehydration. Despite the situation, her eyes showed not fear but fierce determination. "Always," I replied simply, cutting through the zip ties binding her wrists and ankles. "Are you injured?" She shook her head. "Drugged me initially. Wore off hours ago. They have been talking freely, not expecting me to understand what they were saying." Even as a hostage, Catherine had been gathering intelligence. Her resilience never ceased to amaze me. "4 inside, 2 out," she reported as I helped her stand on unsteady legs. "The leader takes orders directly from Harmon. They were discussing what to do with me after you signed the papers. They never intended to release me." "I know." I supported her weight as we moved toward the exit. "They made a critical error in threat assessment." Catherine managed a small smile despite the circumstances. They had no idea who they were dealing with. We moved efficiently through the warehouse toward the loading dock exit. Catherine grew steadier with each step, her natural strength returning. At the door, I paused to confirm the exterior was clear before proceeding. "What did you do to them?" she asked, looking at the bound guards. "Non-lethal neutralization. They will wake with headaches but no permanent damage." I checked the tree line through my night vision. "Law enforcement will find them secured when an anonymous tip arrives tomorrow." The extraction route led through the wooded area behind the warehouse, avoiding roads and potential surveillance. I had positioned our secondary vehicle 1 mile away, hidden on an abandoned logging trail. As we moved through the darkness, Catherine spoke softly. I overheard their conversations. "This goes beyond just forcing people to sell their homes. They mentioned money laundering through the renovations. Cash from drug operations cleaned through construction costs and property sales." "The Cardona connection," I confirmed. "They use Harmon's real estate business to wash their profits." "There is more," Catherine continued as we reached the vehicle. "I heard them discussing other homeowners targeted for the same treatment, a list of properties they plan to sequire. They specifically mentioned the Reynolds family on Oak Street. They have children, James. The implications were clear. Our situation was not unique. The criminal operation was systematically targeting homes throughout the neighborhood, using intimidation and potentially violence to force sales. Once secured in the vehicle, I provided Catherine with water and a protein bar from my pack. She consumed both gratefully while I established our route home, using back roads and evasive driving techniques to ensure we were not followed. We need to collect evidence before they realize what has happened, I explained as we drove. Once they discover their men are neutralized and you have been extracted, they will begin destroying documentation. I can help with that, Catherine said with renewed strength. While captive, I heard specifics about their record keeping. Financial details are stored on Harmon's personal laptop. He keeps it in a safe in his home office. That information would be valuable to federal authorities building a case, I noted, already formulating the next phase of operations. We arrived home at 5:17 hours, using the concealed entrance through the adjacent property that I had established in our security protocols. The house remained under surveillance, with a dark sedan parked down the street. They were waiting for my response to their demand, unaware that the situation had already changed dramatically. Inside, Catherine showered and changed while I secured the perimeter and checked our surveillance systems. No indication that our absence had been detected. No attempts to breach the property. They were professional enough to execute a kidnapping but sloppy in every other aspect of their operation, I observed as Catherine joined me in our makeshift command center. Overconfident, accustomed to intimidating civilians who lack our background. Catherine sat beside me, examining the evidence I had compiled. What happens now? They expect me to contact them in the morning to arrange the property transfer. They believe they hold all the leverage. I displayed the information gathered from the warehouse operation on our secure tablet. Instead, we used the next 12 hours to build an irrefutable case against Harmon and the entire organization. The evidence from the warehouse included photographs of documents listing properties targeted for acquisition, financial records showing cash flows between shell companies, communications between Harmon and the road demons detailing payment for services rendered. This is enough to interest law enforcement but not enough to guarantee convictions, I assessed. We need the complete financial records Catherine heard mentioned, and we need Harmon's direct connection to the Cardona organization. As dawn broke over the neighborhood, Catherine and I finalized our counteroffensive plan. The road demons at the warehouse would remain incapacitated for hours. By the time they were discovered, we would be well into the next phase of our operation. They still think they are the hunters, Catherine observed, studying the satellite imagery of Harmon's estate that I had acquired. That misconception is our greatest tactical advantage, I replied, checking the specialized equipment we would need for the next stage. They have no idea they have awakened something far more dangerous than a compliant homeowner. Catherine's hand found mine across the table. Despite the bruises on her wrists from the restraints, her grip was strong and steady. They thought they could use me to control you, she said quietly. They never understood that together, we are the most dangerous people they have ever encountered. Morning brought the expected call. Richard Harmon himself, voice smooth with practiced authority. Mr. Miller, I trust you have considered our proposal carefully. Your deadline expires at noon. I matched his professional tone. I have the signed documents and some questions about the terms. The terms are not negotiable, Harmon replied, a hint of impatience breaking through his composed facade. Nevertheless, I would prefer to discuss them directly, in person. I paused deliberately. I want assurance that my wife will be released unharmed once the transfer is complete. The brief silence indicated recalculation on his part. That can be arranged. My office, 10 a.m. Your office has too many ears, I countered. The coffee shop on Maple Street, 9:30. Another pause. Very well, bring the signed documents, come alone. The connection ended. Phase 1 of our counteroffensive was in motion. While Catherine secured our evidence in an off-site location, I reached out to my network of former Delta operators now in various federal agencies. Each contact received specific intelligence with instructions to hold until activated. The pieces were being positioned across the board. At precisely 9:30 hours, I entered the coffee shop. Harmon sat at a corner table, two men positioned at separate tables nearby. His security detail, poorly disguised as ordinary customers. I noted their positions, assessed their threat level, and identified multiple points of tactical advantage within the space. I sat across from Harmon, placing a manila envelope on the table. The signed transfer documents, I stated. Now tell me about my wife. Harmon smiled thinly. She will be released once we verify the documents and confirm the property is vacated. Business is business, Mr. Miller, nothing personal. Interesting choice of words, I replied, maintaining eye contact. When did real estate development start requiring kidnapping and extortion? His expression hardened slightly. I would be careful with accusations, Mr. Miller. They can be dangerous to your wife's health. I slid my phone across the table, displaying the thermal image of the warehouse. All heat signatures were highlighted, including the 6 bound men on the floor. My wife is no longer your leverage, Mr. Harmon. I recovered her last night. Your road demon's associates are currently secured and awaiting the arrival of federal authorities. The color drained from his face as the implications registered. His security detail remained oblivious, still scanning for external threats rather than recognizing the predator already at the table. That is impossible, he whispered. A common misconception when dealing with someone whose capabilities you have severely underestimated. I retrieved my phone. Now we negotiate on my terms. Harmon's hand moved toward his jacket. I caught his wrist beneath the table, applying precise pressure to the median nerve. To observers, we appeared to be having a normal conversation. In reality, he was experiencing excruciating pain without visible indication. Your men cannot help you, I informed him quietly. By the time they recognize the situation, this would be over. 27 different ways by my current count. I released his wrist. Harmon exhaled slowly, regaining his composure with visible effort. What do you want? He asked finally. Complete cessation of all actions against properties in Oak Ridge Estates. Immediate dissolution of your relationship with the road demons. And your comprehensive records regarding the Cardona money laundering operation. Harmon paled further at the mention of the Cardonas. You have no idea what you are involving yourself in. These people will not stop with threats. They eliminate problems permanently. Like the Jenkins family from last year, I asked, referencing information Catherine had overheard during her captivity. The couple who refused to sell and subsequently died in an unfortunate house fire. Harmon remained silent, his expression confirming the implication. You have until 5 p.m. today to provide the complete financial records, I continued. Every transaction, every property, every connection to the Cardonas. They would kill me, Harmon protested. That is a statistical probability, I acknowledged. However, your survival chances decrease to absolute zero if you fail to comply with my request. I stood to leave. 5 p.m. My house. Come alone. Your security detail is welcome to observe from a distance, but they will not intervene if they value their continued employment. As I walked away, I activated the next phase of our operation. Text messages went out to former teammates now positioned throughout federal agencies. The intelligence we had gathered was substantial, but required additional documentation to ensure comprehensive prosecution of all involved parties. Catherine was waiting at our designated rendezvous point, a public library 3 towns over. "How did he respond?" she asked as I slid into the seat beside her. Exactly as anticipated. Initial denial followed by fear when confronted with evidence of his exposed position. I checked my secure phone for updates. The road demons were discovered 30 minutes ago following an anonymous tip. Local police have them in custody, but federal agencies are already moving to assume jurisdiction. Catherine nodded, reviewing the information on her tablet. "I have identified 7 other families who were forced out of their homes through similar tactics. 3 have agreed to provide statements." While Catherine coordinated with the growing network of Harmon's victims, I implemented the psychological pressure component of our strategy. Board members of the HOA each received an envelope containing photographs of themselves in private moments, their homes at night, their children at school, their secret meetings with Harmon. No threats, no demands, just the unmistakable message that they were being watched. By early afternoon, 2 board members had contacted my secure line, eager to provide evidence in exchange for consideration. The alliance of intimidation was fracturing under pressure. The next target required direct approach. The Road Demons clubhouse was largely empty following the warehouse arrests, but the senior leadership remained free. Intelligence indicated their president, Michael Chains Donovan, was inside with his remaining lieutenants, likely discussing damage control. I entered the clubhouse alone at 14:30 hours. The bartender reached beneath the counter, undoubtedly for a weapon, but froze when I placed my military identification on the bar. "Mr. Donovan will want to speak with me," I stated calmly, regarding his future options. Minutes later, I was escorted to a back office where Donovan sat behind a desk adorned with biker paraphernalia and a poorly concealed shotgun. "You have exactly 30 seconds to explain why I should not have you removed in pieces," Donovan growled. I placed a folder on his desk. "Because in 27 minutes, federal agents will execute simultaneous warrants on this property, your residence, and your storage facilities on Industrial Drive. The evidence they possess connects your organization directly to kidnapping, extortion, and as an accessory to money laundering for the Cardonas." Donovan's expression shifted from anger to calculation as he processed the implications. "Additionally," I continued, "your men who were arrested this morning are already negotiating cooperation agreements. The first to provide actionable intelligence receives the most favorable consideration." "What do you want?" Donovan asked, echoing Harmon's earlier question. "Everything you have on Richard Harmon and his connection to the Cardonas. Dates, transactions, communications. In return, I ensure federal authorities understand that your organization was merely contracted muscle, unaware of the broader criminal enterprise." Donovan considered the offer for a long moment before opening a wall safe behind his desk. He extracted a USB drive and a folder of documents. "Harmon kept us compartmentalized, but I maintain insurance on all business partners. He slid the items across the desk. This contains every interaction, payment, and instruction we received, including some activities I suspect even the Cardonas are unaware of. I secured the intelligence and stood to leave. A prudent decision, Mr. Donovan. I suggest you use the remaining time before the federal raid to consider which of your activities might qualify for cooperation credit. As I exited the clubhouse, I notified Colonel Hayes of the additional evidence acquired. The RICO case against the Cardona organization was growing exponentially stronger with each passing hour. Catherine and I reconvened at our secured location to prepare for the final confrontation with Harmon. The evidence gathered from multiple sources painted a comprehensive picture of systematic criminal activity spanning years: property fraud, money laundering, extortion, witness intimidation, and potentially murder. "Are you certain he will come?" Catherine asked as we reviewed the final preparations. "He has no choice," I explained. "The Cardonas will eliminate him once they learn of the federal investigation. We represent his only potential path to survival, however slim he may perceive those odds to be." At precisely 1700 hours, Richard Harmon's luxury sedan turned onto our street. As instructed, his security remained at a distance, watching from two vehicles parked at the intersection. I observed his approach through our security monitors. His normally confident stride was hesitant, his practiced composure visibly strained. He had brought a briefcase, presumably containing the requested documentation. "Ready?" I asked Catherine, who had positioned herself in the living room, out of sight from the entrance but with clear lines of fire if needed. She nodded, calm and focused. We had survived worse situations in our years together. This was simply another operation requiring precision execution. I opened the door before Harmon could ring the bell. "Mr. Harmon, please come in." He entered cautiously, eyes darting around the entryway, assessing potential threats. The behavior of prey rather than predator. "I brought what you asked for," he said, raising the briefcase slightly. "Everything about the financial arrangements with the Cardonas, account numbers, property transactions, the complete operation." "A wise decision," I acknowledged, directing him to the dining room where recording devices had been carefully positioned. "Though I suspect your cooperation is motivated less by wisdom and more by imminent threat of elimination by your employers." Harmon placed the briefcase on the table, hands trembling slightly as he entered the combination. "You have no idea the resources these people control, the connections they have. They own judges, police captains, even a state representative. All of which will be irrelevant when federal indictments are unsealed," I replied. "Now, let us review what you have brought." For the next hour, Harmon detailed the criminal enterprise, the process of identifying vulnerable homeowners, the systematic harassment using HOA regulations, the escalation to direct threats when necessary, the below-market acquisitions followed by cosmetic renovations, the inflated sales to shell companies that laundered drug proceeds through mortgage payments. Most disturbing were the special cases involving homeowners who refused to sell despite maximum pressure. "The Jenkins fire was made to look like an electrical fault," Harmon admitted, his voice hollow. "I did not order it. That came directly from Carlos Cardona, a message to others who might consider resistance." By the time he finished his detailed confession, Richard Harmon had implicated himself, the entire HOA board, the Road Demons leadership, and key members of the Cardona organization in a criminal conspiracy spanning 5 years and involving millions in laundered funds. "What happens now?" he asked, shoulders slumped in defeat. Now you make a call to your security detail. Tell them the meeting is running long and to return to their regular positions. Then you will remain here while federal agents take your formal statement." Harmon made the call as instructed, his voice carefully controlled to avoid alerting his men to the changed circumstances. As the sun set over Oak Ridge Estates, unmarked vehicles began positioning themselves on surrounding streets. Federal agents moved into position, preparing for coordinated arrests of all major players in the conspiracy. I contacted Colonel Hayes on our secure line. "Package is secured, confession recorded, documentation in hand." "Teams are in position," Hayes confirmed. "Moving on primary targets in 5 minutes, secondary targets in 8. Hold your location until clearance." Catherine brought water for Harmon, who sat staring at the evidence of his crimes spread across our dining room table. "Why did you target our house specifically?" she asked, the question that had lingered since the beginning. Harmon gave a bitter laugh entirely devoid of humor. "Geographic completeness. Your property was the final piece in a contiguous block of 8 homes. The Cardonas wanted to develop the entire section into luxury condominiums. Nothing personal, just business." The irony was not lost on either of us. Our lives had been upended not for any specific reason, but merely because our home occupied space on a development map. Outside, the operation to dismantle the entire criminal network was beginning. Simultaneous raids, coordinated arrests, the culmination of our counteroffensive against an enemy that had made the fatal error of bringing war to our doorstep. "They really should have researched who they were targeting," Catherine observed quietly as we awaited the all-clear signal. Harmon looked up with genuine confusion. "What do you mean?" I allowed myself a small smile. "Let us just say your associates chose the wrong house to target with amateur intimidation tactics." The federal operation moved with precision and overwhelming force. 27 arrests executed simultaneously across 3 counties. Richard Harmon, 4 HOA board members, 11 Road Demons members, 9 Cardona organization operators, 3 corrupt local officials who had facilitated the scheme. We watched from our living room as news helicopters circled above the neighborhood, capturing footage of handcuffed HOA board members being escorted to unmarked vehicles. The expressions of neighbors standing on their lawns ranged from confusion to vindication. Colonel Hayes arrived personally to take custody of Harmon and the evidence we had compiled. "The U.S. Attorney is already reviewing the case," Hayes informed us as his team secured the documentation. "With Harmon's testimony and the financial records, we have enough for RICO charges against the entire network. The Cardona regional operation has effectively been dismantled." "What about the families who were forced out of their homes?" Catherine asked, ever focused on the human impact of the situation. "Civil forfeiture proceedings will recover most properties," Hayes explained. "Those who lost homes will have first right to repurchase at original sale price, with additional compensation for damages." As federal agents departed with Harmon, Hayes remained behind briefly. "The official report will indicate that the investigation stemmed from routine financial monitoring that identified suspicious real estate transactions," he stated. "Your involvement will remain classified. For your safety." I nodded in appreciation. Standard operational security. Hayes smiled slightly. "Though I suspect certain senior officials might connect the dots when they learn which neighborhood was involved." After he departed, Catherine and I stood on our front porch, watching the last federal vehicles leave the area. The sudden absence of the constant surveillance that had become our norm over recent weeks was almost disconcerting. "Is it really over?" Catherine asked, leaning against my shoulder. "The immediate threat is neutralized," I confirmed. "The criminal organization dismantled. The legal process will take months, possibly years, but the operational phase is complete." The following days brought a community in turmoil as residents absorbed the shocking revelations. News reports detailed the criminal conspiracy that had operated beneath the veneer of suburban respectability. Property records were examined, past homeowner departures scrutinized. The full scope of the operation became public knowledge. 3 days after the arrests, a community meeting was called at the local elementary school. The gymnasium was filled beyond capacity as residents sought answers and direction following the dissolution of the HOA board. The district attorney addressed the gathering, outlining the criminal charges and the process for establishing legitimate community governance. When questions turned to how the conspiracy had been uncovered, the official explanation of routine financial monitoring was met with skeptical murmurs. An elderly man near the front stood slowly. Jacob Renner, the neighbor who had first warned me about previous homeowners being forced out. "I think we all know there was nothing routine about how this came to light," he stated, turning to where Catherine and I sat quietly at the back of the room. "Some folks stood their ground when the rest of us were too afraid. Some folks refused to be intimidated." All eyes turned toward us. I maintained my neutral expression, neither confirming nor denying the implication. The interim county manager cleared his throat awkwardly. "What matters now is rebuilding your community governance on transparent and ethical foundations. A temporary oversight committee will be established until proper elections can be held." As the meeting concluded, neighbors approached us tentatively, some offering thanks, others apologizing for their silence during the intimidation campaign, many simply curious about the quiet couple who had somehow stood against a criminal organization and prevailed. 1 month later, the neighborhood began the process of establishing a new homeowners association. The temporary oversight committee nominated candidates for a proper election. To my surprise, my name appeared on the ballot despite not volunteering. "The community needs someone with integrity and courage," Catherine argued when I expressed reluctance. "Someone who understands the responsibility of leadership." The election results were nearly unanimous. Though I had never sought such a position, the experience of rebuilding community trust after systematic abuse of power resonated with my military background. Establishing proper procedures, implementing accountability measures, creating transparency in all operations. The skills translated more effectively than I had anticipated. 6 months after the arrests, the first federal trials began. Catherine and I provided depositions but were spared public testimony due to the overwhelming documentation evidence. Harmon's cooperation agreement ensured his testimony against higher-level Cardona operators. The Road Demons president similarly chose cooperation over lengthy incarceration. The Jenkins family fire was reopened as a homicide investigation. Forensic evidence preserved by cautious fire investigators provided crucial links to Cardona enforcers. 2 men ultimately faced murder charges alongside their racketeering counts. Families who had been forced from their homes began the process of recovery. Some returned to the neighborhood. Others accepted compensation and started fresh elsewhere. The emotional wounds would take longer to heal than the financial ones. 1 year after the confrontation that had triggered the federal investigation, Oak Ridge Estates hosted its first community celebration. Tables lined our street, laden with potluck dishes. Children played on lawns without parents constantly watching for threats. Neighbors conversed without the underlying current of fear that had characterized the Harmon era. Catherine and I hosted several families on our back patio, including the Reynolds family whose children played happily with neighborhood friends. The knowledge that they had been next on the target list but had been spared our experience provided a sense of purpose to all we had endured. As evening approached, neighbors gathered in the cul-de-sac for an impromptu toast. Jacob Renner raised his glass toward Catherine and me. "To neighbors who become defenders," he offered, "and to a community rebuilt on truth and justice." Catherine squeezed my hand as glasses were raised around us. The weight of our ordeal had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something meaningful, something that had protected others from similar suffering. Later that night, as we sat on our back porch watching fireflies dance across the garden I had planted as therapy, Catherine rested her head against my shoulder. "Not exactly the quiet retirement we planned," she observed with gentle humor. I smiled, watching the peaceful neighborhood that now truly felt like home. "Perhaps not, but worth defending all the same." "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The mission, the purpose?" I considered the question thoughtfully. I miss the brotherhood, the clarity of purpose. But this, I gestured to our home, the neighborhood beyond, this is what all those missions were ultimately about, creating spaces where people can live without fear. Catherine raised her glass in the moonlight. "To new beginnings," she said softly. "To home," I agreed, as we looked out over the peaceful neighborhood we had fought to preserve, now truly our own at last.